Բարև ձեզ հարգելի բարեկամներ, Սփյուռքի ձայնը հեռուստահանդեսը դարձյալ ձեզ հետ է։ Այսօրվա մեր հաղորդումը ուզում եմ սկսել այն պատմական իրողությամբ, որ տեղի ունեցավ անցյալ շաբաթ հոկտեմբերի 29-ին Միացյալ Նահանգների կոնգրեսում։ 405 կողմ 11 դեմ ձայների հարաբերությամբ ընդունվեց հայոց ցեղասպանությունը ճանաչող բանաձևը։ 226 դեմոկրատ, 178 կողմ եւ 11 դեմ հանրապետական ձայներով։ Այս բանաձևը իրավական ուժ կստանա, եթե այն հաստատվի Սենատի եւ ապա Միացյալ Նահանգների նախագահի կողմից։ Նախկինում այս բանաձևը կոնգրեսի կողմից ընդունվել էր 1984 թվականին, բայց չէր հաստատվել Սենատի կողմից։ Այժմ ձեր ուշադրությանն եմ ներկայացնում մի քանի ելույթներից հատվածներ հոկտեմբերի 29-ին ներկայացուցիչների պալատում տեղի ունեցած քննարկումներից։
The Encyclopedia for the Armenian Genocide states during the march, many Armenians were killed indiscriminately by Ottoman forces, which left a trail of corpses along the route of the march. To break the will of the marchers, the killings were performed with swords, resulting in great bloodshed. And as they continued the march, they were marched into the Syrian desert, where they died from starvation. At the Center of Holocaust and Human Rights and Genocide Education exhibit at Brookdale Community College, which my good friend and colleague from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, knows so well as well, they have many remembrances of people in our state and elsewhere who were survivors. Well, one of those survivors put it this way, and I quote her, "Life was a matter of trying to survive. Every morning a cart would come around and take away the sick and the dead to be dumped into a common grave. They had taken my brother because he was a little sick. My crying and weeping were of no avail, especially because I was sick and petrified of being put on the cart." She was one of the lucky ones who survived. Let me remind my colleagues that the Genocide Convention of 1950, which the Turkish government has ratified, makes clear, here's what the Genocide Convention says, and the Armenian Genocide fits this to a T. The definition says this: genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, such as killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of that group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. In the case of the Armenians, it wasn't in part, it was in whole. They wanted the Armenians eviscerated from the face of the earth. Let me just point out to my colleagues, despite Turkish government threats, and they do make threats, am I hearing the ambassador made threats in the year 2000? In fact, you remember that. It was outrageous. Well, 28 countries in 49 U.S. states, including my own state of New Jersey, have passed a law, resolution, or declaration recognizing the Armenian genocide.
This resolution, Mr. Speaker, recognizes the horrific and systematic efforts to commit genocide against the Armenian people a century ago. There can be no denial of the Armenian genocide, which is evidenced by historical documentation and the emotional scars still borne by the descendants of its survivors. It was a campaign of ethnic cleansing committed by the Ottoman Empire during and after the First World War, and it led to the deaths of 1.5 million Armenians, alongside other targeted groups. Now, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Smith referenced Ambassador Morgenthau, who was our ambassador at this period of time. He said this: when the Turkish authorities gave the orders for these deportations, they were merely giving the death warrant to a whole race. They understood this well, and in their conversations with me, they made no particular attempt to conceal the fact. He went on to say that I am confident that the whole history of the human race contains no such horrible episode as this. Of course, we were tragically to see an even greater Holocaust in terms of numbers of lives lost in just some 30 years later. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the British ambassador to the United States in an October 1915 speech said this: "The massacres are the result of a policy which, as far as I can ascertain, has been entertained for some considerable time. And I want to read this language. Considered for some considerable time by the gang of unscrupulous adventurers who are now in possession of the government of the Turkish Empire. They hesitated to put it in practice until they thought the favorable moment had come. And that moment seems to have arrived about the month of April.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of H.Res. 296, which I introduced along with Representative Bilrakis to recognize and commemorate the Armenian Genocide. This is a vote that I have fought for 19 years to cast. My wonderful colleagues, Anna Eshoo, Jackie Spear, have fought far longer than I have. It is one that tens of thousands of my constituents, my Armenian American constituents, have waited decades to see. It is a moment that so many have worked and struggled and prayed for, a moment when the House of Representatives refused to be enlisted in the cause of genocide denial. This April would have marked the 104th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, the systematic murder of 1.5 million Armenians and the displacement of millions more by the Ottoman Empire from 1915 to 1923. Many other religious and ethnic minorities in the Ottoman Empire met similar fates, among them the Greeks, the Assyrians, the Chaldeans, and others. More than a century later, it is our solemn responsibility to remember those who were lost, to seek justice and restitution, and to educate Americans and those around the world about the crime of genocide. The facts of the genocide are horrific and undisputed by historians. They were recorded by American diplomats serving in the Ottoman Empire at the time, who bore witness in official cables to the annihilation of the Armenian population in the Ottoman Empire, a crime that at the time had no name. And though it lacked a name, there was no doubt in the observers of the time that they were witnessing a crime on a massive and industrial scale. The U.S. ambassador of the Ottoman Empire, Henry Morgenthau, would recall later, "I am confident that the whole history of the human race contains no such horrific, horrible episode as this. The great massacres and persecutions of the past seem almost insignificant when compared with the suffering of the Armenian race in 1915. It was only decades later that Raphael Lemkin, a Holocaust survivor, coined the term genocide to describe the atrocities that had been visited upon the Jews as well as the Armenians. I have sat with survivors of the genocide, men and women, their numbers dwindling year after year, and heard them recall the destruction of their lives and the loss of all they had known. As children, they were forced from their homes and saw their families beaten, raped, and murdered. They fled across continents and oceans to build lives in this nation, in Armenia, and around the world. For them and for their descendants, the word genocide is sacred because it means that the world has not and will not forget. To deny genocide, on the other hand, is profane. It is, in the words of Elie Wiesel, a double killing. What we must do, Mr. Speaker, is state the facts. We can say that the Ottoman Empire committed this grotesque crime against the Armenians. But their campaign of extermination failed. And above all, we will never forget. And we will never again be silenced.
This is an historic day in the House of Representatives, and it's one that I've been waiting for 27 years. Between 1915 and 1923, 1.5 million Armenians and hundreds of thousands, and this is a historical fact that many people are not aware of, that there were hundreds of thousands of Assyrians, Greeks, Aramaeans, Maronites, and other Christians that were systematically slaughtered by the Ottoman Empire. This is deeply personal for me. I'm the only member of Congress of Armenian Assyrian descent and one of only 3 with Armenian heritage in the House of Representatives, I think in the entire Congress, Senate and House. Some of you know that I had members of my own family that were among those that perished, and my parents fled with theirs to America. As my father said, the best idea that was ever born was America. What all of those that were persecuted had in common was that they were Christians, and that's why they were hunted down and slaughtered. This resolution not only honors my ancestors, but all those who perished in the first genocide of the 20th century. The United States has been missing in action on the honor roll of over 24 countries, 14 of which are NATO allies, and 49 states in our country that have formally recognized the Armenian Genocide. And today we can end over 100 years of silence by passing this resolution. Mr. Speaker, there's also an historic parallel as we are considering this resolution, and that is that Turkey is pursuing the ethnic cleansing of Kurds in Syria as we meet today. As Pope Francis declared when he visited the Armenian Genocide Memorial in Yerevan in 2016, memory should never be watered down or forgotten. Memory is the source of peace and the future. So today we remember, and we say to all those who perished, we remember, we love you, and we set an example for the young people of our country that the moral authority of the United States is well and alive. As we pass this resolution, I yield back.
104 years ago, 1.5 million Armenians were murdered by the Ottoman Empire in the first genocide of the 20th century. Ever since, Armenian communities from across the world, including those in my district, have been forced to fight for recognition and justice, of denial in so many ways, from the illegal invasion of Cyprus by Turkey to the vicious attacks on Kurds within and without of the borders of Turkey. With our vote today, the United States takes a long overdue step to stop Turkey from hiding the truth of its actions. The Armenian genocide must be acknowledged by all, and in doing so, we can hope to prevent the next genocide.
It's been more than 100 years since the atrocities committed against innocent Armenians and other ethnic and religious minorities at the hands of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire genocidal campaign from 1915 to 1923 killed 1.5 million Armenians, men and women and children, as well as Greeks, Assyrians, Chaldeans, and Syriacs throughout a series of executions and death marches. Finally, today we are entering into the United States record the Armenian Genocide and the historical fact. Today we end a century of international silence. There will not be another period of indifference or international ignorance to the lives lost to systematic murder.
April 24th, 1915 is a day that lives in infamy in the hearts and minds of millions of Armenians worldwide. It's a day that I grew up understanding from my Armenian mother to be one of the darkest in history. It's the day that the Ottoman government embarked on a systematic slaughter of 1.5 million Armenians, 2/3 of the Armenian population. This genocide is recognized in countries around the world, including Canada, France, and Germany. It's recognized in 49 states in our union as the first genocide of the 20th century. Yet the House of Representatives hasn't recognized both the genocide occurred and that the Ottoman Empire perpetrated it. Elie Wiesel called it denying genocide, and in particular the Armenian genocide, a double killing, because it not only exterminates a group of people It murders the memory of that crime. Congress must ensure that memory is not destroyed and those lives are honored. As a child, I listened to my mom speak of the atrocity with pain and fear. She is gone now, but her pain lives on in me to this very day. By righting this terrible wrong, one that has festered for far too long, we are alleviating that pain and sending a message that history can't be rewritten. We are stating in no uncertain terms that America will no longer abandon Armenians with feeble excuses made for a so-called ally. We are affirming that truth is truth. Thousands of documents totaling 37,000 pages in the National Archives supports the truth. Armenian genocide, we must say it is here, it happened, it will never happen again. We must make that commitment.